Imagine an empire that lasted over 1,000 years, an empire with unstoppable legions, engineering marvels, and roads that connected 3 continents. Now, imagine that empire collapsing because of a tax. Sound impossible? Well, in 301 AD, Roman Emperor Diocletian introduced a tax policy so devastating that historians believe it accelerated the fall of one of history's greatest civilizations. This is the story of how trying to save Rome actually destroyed it. By the late 3rd century, Rome was in crisis. The empire was bleeding money, constant wars on multiple frontiers, rampant inflation, prices were skyrocketing by 1,000% or more. Military coups, emperors were being assassinated left and right. Debasement of currency, coins that were once silver now contained barely 5% precious metal. Entered Diocletian in 284 AD. He was a military strongman who promised to restore order. And restore order he did, by essentially restructuring the entire Roman economy. But his solution? It was worse than the disease. Diocletian introduced something called the Capitatio-Jugatio system. Let me break down why this was absolutely catastrophic. First, it was a head tax combined with a land tax. Every person and every piece of agricultural land was assigned a tax unit. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. The problems? Problem 1, it was inflexible. Whether your crops failed, your family member died, or barbarians burned your farm, your tax burden stayed exactly the same. No exceptions, no mercy. Problem 2, it was collected in kind, not cash. You couldn't just pay money. You had to hand over actual grain, livestock, goods. The state literally took the food from your table. Problem 3, collective punishment. Here's the truly evil part. If one farmer in your village couldn't pay, the entire community had to make up the difference. Problem 4, it was enforced brutally. Tax collectors had the power to torture, imprison, and confiscate property. Ancient sources describe collectors using red-hot irons and other horrific methods to extract payments. The effects were immediate and catastrophic. Rural collapse. Farmers began abandoning their lands in massive numbers. Why work yourself to death when the state takes everything anyway? Entire villages became ghost towns. Agricultural production plummeted. Rise of the patronage system. Desperate farmers became tenants of wealthy landowners, essentially becoming serfs. This planted the seeds of medieval feudalism. The middle class was annihilated. Economic paralysis. Diocletian also imposed the Edict on Maximum Prices to control inflation. Combined with the harsh taxation, it created a black market economy. Legal commerce nearly stopped. Population decline. People stopped having children. Why bring a child into a world where they'd be born into tax slavery? Birth rates collapsed. Brain drain. The educated and wealthy fled to the countryside or even beyond Roman borders. Cities that were once vibrant centers of culture became shells of their former selves. One Roman writer of the time said, "The tax collectors are more savage than the enemy." Think about that. People feared their own government more than barbarian invaders. Here's the cruel irony. Diocletian's tax was designed to save Rome, but it had the opposite effect. The military weakened. Why? Because the agricultural base that fed the army collapsed. Rome increasingly had to rely on barbarian mercenaries who had no loyalty to Rome. The empire became fragmented. Regional strongmen gained power because they could offer protection from both barbarians and tax collectors. Central authority crumbled. Within 175 years of Diocletian's reforms, the Western Roman Empire fell. In 476 AD, the last Roman emperor was deposed. Many historians point to Diocletian's economic policies as a critical accelerant. The East survived as Byzantium, partly because they eventually reformed this brutal tax system. The West? It descended into the Dark Ages. So, what's the lesson here? Rome didn't fall just because of barbarian invasions or military weakness. It fell because it devoured its own people. The tax that was supposed to save Rome actually broke the social contract between the state and its citizens.